students. I am a sophomore from Dallas, Texas. And today I'm going to be talking about AP Environmental Science, the renewable energy sources. The little less known ones is mainly what we're going to be focusing on. I'm sorry, I forgot about this one. Follow Think5able on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, all their social media. Go to app.5able.me, look up your favorite streamers. There are community platforms. It's really a great resource to help you study for any AP exam at all. Okay, so here's what I'm going to go over tonight. We're going to go over nuclear power, hydroelectric power, which is dams, geothermal energy, hydrogen fuel cells. Then you're going to have specific time if you have really specific questions or even questions about anything in APES that I can help you with. Then we're going to go through a practice FRQ, and maybe if we have time, we'll go through some multiple choice questions that I made. Sound great? Okay. So we're going to start off with nuclear power. So nuclear power, you can use 3 elements for nuclear power mainly: uranium, thorium, and plutonium. Uranium is the most used. It's usually what you'll see on the AP exam. It's what you'll see whenever you're discussing. It's the easiest to talk about on an FRQ. Uranium, it's pretty easy to remember. It's just the U on the periodic table. Nothing hard about that. So uranium is a radioactive element, and that's why we can use it for nuclear power. So nuclear fission, that's the process of how you turn uranium into actual energy that we can use. So nuclear fission, instead of reading the slide, I'll actually go through what it does. So when you have nuclear fission, you have your, atom of uranium right here, and the neutrons in the nuclei are going to try to split. It's going to try to break apart and make 2 new neutrons. And it's going to try to bump into other things and make more neutrons so that it can make more energy. And so when it makes more energy, then those neutrons get excited, everything moves around, and that's how we're actually going to make the energy. And the nuclear fission can make a ton of energy in a very small amount of time. So this is not an easy way to understand it, but you can think about nuclear fission starts with the uranium in 1 atom, but what happens is it's an easiest way to relate this. It's like a pyramid scheme, I guess. Nuclear power is a pyramid scheme. You can remember it that way. So each little neutron in the nuclei splits off and makes 2 more, and then it makes 2 more, and then the pyramid gets really wide, and that's how we get so much energy from nuclear power. It comes with a vast, so nuclear power, okay, so nuclear power does have to do with hydrogen and helium, but for the harvesting of the energy, we use the radioactive elements. So with what you're thinking about is hydrogen, are you thinking about like hydrogen bombs or anything like that? What's really just the fusion of hydrogen? Well, like that's the whole process. They produce, okay, so hydrogen production is, I'm sorry, okay, I will get back to you on that one. I'm not 100% sure. I will figure that out within the next minute or 2 while I go through the rest of these, while I go through the rest of the slide. And why do we like nuclear power? Well, it's like all of the other renewable energy sources. It produces 10 million times the amount of energy that fossil fuels can produce by burning them. And also, it has with less than 1/6 of the carbon emissions. So making nuclear power doesn't actually create any carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. What it does is the carbon dioxide emissions are coming from the transporting of uranium. So whenever you drive your car, you're burning fossil fuels, you're burning your fuel, so we get the fuel from that. Whenever you extract the uranium in the mines, you're using special tools that need to be powered by fossil fuels in the status quo. So that's where all of the carbon emissions are coming from, but we're not actually getting any carbon dioxide from burning from the fission of any of the uranium or other radioactive elements. Now, everything comes with its consequences. So let's see, the drawbacks of nuclear power. So while a tiny amount of uranium can make a lot of power, there is not a lot in the world. It's a non-renewable resource. When you were in 3rd grade, when you were young, you learned that we don't like fossil fuels because there's not a lot of them. It's a non-renewable resource. We need to be using solar. It's the same thing here. Technically, uranium is a non-renewable resource. It's not bad for the environment, but it is non-renewable, so we're not going to be able to produce it as quickly as we are harvesting it here to get it for nuclear energy. Now, you really think that like there's a lot of something until you notice that we're trying to power the whole world. Almost 8 billion people in this world need power. Now, some people, like in the US, we use power and electricity a lot more than any other country on the globe. We use the most power and electricity per capita. We use more than China and India combined. We use more than China and Russia combined, and we also use more than India. Sorry about that. But that's why nuclear power, it'll power us for a few years, but then we might run out of uranium. That's what we're scared about. That's one of the problems. So also, the use of nuclear energy also produces dangerous radioactive waste. So even after all of the fission and the element is not usable anymore, you still have all of this radioactive waste to deal with. Uranium, plutonium, it's still radioactive. I'm sorry. The uranium, you know how there's nuclear bombs, you know how there's like special like the World War II, the Manhattan Project, they tried to create an atomic bomb. Nuclear power works the same way. It's radioactive. If you've ever heard of what I'm about to cover, 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, the nuclear meltdowns, that's dangerous waste that's being produced. Also Fukushima, yeah. But the thing about Fukushima is it's a little less known and it wasn't caused by a nuclear meltdown. So the difference between 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl versus Fukushima is that Fukushima was caused by another natural disaster. It was caused by the tidal wave, which then caused problems with the reactors, which then led to the meltdown, but it wasn't the same cause as 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl. So thank you for mentioning that so I could cover that. And then the radioactive waste. So a while ago we thought, well, why can't we just bring all of this radioactive waste to the desert in South Nevada? That was actually our government's plan to deal with all of the energy radioactive waste from nuclear power. Just throw it somewhere where nobody's living. Not going to cause a problem if we bury it under the mountain, right? Well, the thing about that is you have to transport the uranium from the nuclear power reactors to mountains in the South Nevada desert where it can be stored and disposed of. So, like, I don't know if you know the statistics on car crashes, train crashes, planes, how likely they are to get in accidents. There are too many factors to deal with. So what we do is we just leave all of the reactor cores and all of the uranium, we leave it in the same place that we get the nuclear power from. And they have very special containment protocols and other types of safety regulations they have to follow to keep the control rods and the uranium safe and not radioactive, so we don't like kill a ton of people because that would be bad. Okay, so on to the last bullet point. In addition, accidents at nuclear power plants have the potential to release large amounts of harmful radiation into the environment. So it's just like the problems that we're facing with the radioactive waste disposal. So with 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl, they were both caused by human errors. In Chernobyl, when they were running tests on the nuclear power plant, what happened is the guy basically forgot to turn the safety system back on to regulate how much energy is being produced. So I'm going to skip back to the last slide for a second. So remember when I was talking about the nuclear fission? So with the nuclear fission, what happens is now, what we do now is we put control rods in our nuclear reactors. And what these do is it limits the amount of energy and the amount of nuclei that are split for nuclear fission. So you remember when I was talking about the pyramid, like how the one little neutron makes another and then those both make two? So what that does is it tries to limit it. The control rods, they're kind of like a rod, rectangular, circular, I guess, shape. So think about it like that. So we have the one neutron that makes two neutrons, but we're going to cut it off here, and then this one makes more, but then we're going to cut it off here. So it's trying to limit the amount so we don't have an excess of energy. Because I don't know if you watched the other energy podcast from Fiveable, but they talked about when you make too much energy, you can't just do anything with it. You can't just destroy energy. First law of thermodynamics, remember that for the exam. Can't destroy energy. Only must be transformed. So you can't make too much energy if it's not going to be used. So what the generator, do you want me to talk about what the generators do when I'm done with this slide right here? I can definitely do that. Okay, I will. So, with this excess amount of nuclear power, which is radioactive, the whole problem with nuclear power, the public's concerned about, is it going to kill me? Am I going to get radioactive diseases? No. So, the 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl were caused by human error. It wasn't caused by anything that's wrong with nuclear power. It's just that the humans didn't do it right. That's why Fukushima is special, because it was an act of God, natural disaster that caused the meltdown. So what generators do for energy? So the generators, when you burn the coal for energy, or when you're using furnaces or anything, when you're using solar energy, it's manufactured in one specific location, right? Like all of the factories, that's what burns the coal. You've seen like the smog on top of smokestacks before, right? So basically, whenever it makes the electricity, so basically it'll spin the magnet inside of the coil to make electricity. Electromagnet makes electricity. So they take it on these wires that, like, you've seen those little poles before that have like the wires on the side of the road. That's what moves the energy. So when it gets to a certain neighborhood, you have these substations and these generators. And what it does is it takes this raw electricity and energy that it's getting from the power plants, and it's making it into a usable form. It's transforming it into different wattage, into alternating current, into direct current that can be used to power your home, and to turn on your lights, to turn on your AC, to heat your home. So that's going to reduce the wattage of the power and transform it and let off thermal energy. But whenever you have too much, you can't process it. The energy is never going to get used. So generators, like, you know how you get your electricity bill every month? I don't know if you guys are students, so you might have never seen an electricity bill before. But you have your monthly usage, right? So there are people that like Atmos Energy, Garland Power and Light, all of these power companies, they pay them to look at how much people use every month to know exactly how much energy they produce for 2 reasons. One, you don't want to burn more fossil fuels than are necessary. You don't want to have more emissions. That's the whole goal of the game. Less pollution, more time on Earth. Woohoo. But also, they only want their generators to produce certain amounts of power to be used. So basically, when you're using this power, you want it to be the exact amount that you're going to use. You can get really close to the amount of energy that you're going to use. And I don't know if you've had to do math practice in your APES classes yet, but when you do, you'll see you have to convert kilowatt hours to megawatts and other forms of energy. And you're going to have to do, 10% is lost to heat or whatever. You have done the math, so you might know what I'm talking about. Okay, so I'm sorry if I'm going a little fast. If you want me to slow down, please say something. And also, any questions of what I've said so far? Okay. Guess not. Thanks, Tanya, for actively participating and always asking questions. It really helps. So this is what a nuclear power reactor looks like. So I wish you could see me. Oh, you know what? Actually, I can do that. So I can use this pointer right here. Perfect. Okay. So uranium fuel. So I was looking at my stuff, Tanya, and hydrogen and helium, that's not really involved in the nuclear fusion of uranium. The only thing in hydrogen is it's an excess reactant. It's a product that can get let off as gas. I didn't really see much else in my presentation about what hydrogen and helium has to do. If you have any questions, ask your teacher. She or he is probably more knowledgeable than me. I mean, I'm smart. I did get a good score on the exam, but ask them specifically about uranium, nuclear fuel, and what hydrogen has to do with it. Like, I would definitely do that if you're not sure. So for nuclear power that I'm talking about right now, the uranium fuel rod here, it's put into the nuclear reactor right here. And these are the control rods that I was talking about. It limits the amount of fission that can happen. So once it makes the energy, all of the energy wants to go, the energy wants to move, woohoo! So it goes into the core cooling system, and it gets pumped into this water, and then it will heat up the water. That pump right there will That pump right there, it'll make energy, it'll make heat, which turns this water into steam right here. The steam goes through the secondary cooling system to cool back down, to turn back into water to be reused right here in the reactor building. But then what happens to the energy is it goes into a condenser here. The hot water, the cold water, gets cooled. The energy goes off away from the generator right up here next to the steam turbine. And then the plus minus, the energy, the power can be used for anything. So steam goes off, goes into the steam turbine, turns the coil with the magnet, turns the electromagnet, which makes electricity to be used in generators. The generators send it off to the power substations to be used in your neighborhood so you can have power. All right. I'm going to go on to our next topic, which is hydroelectric power, also known as dams. So, dams, there's not a lot. So basically, when you're talking about energy, all of them are made the same. Basically, the thing is burned or there's steam released, and then it turns a turbine, which turns this coil with the magnet in it, which makes electricity. It's sent off, it's processed, you get to use the electricity, right? So dams work the same way. The water turns, the steam goes up, just like the nuclear. You just don't have this part in it. Anything to the left of my cursor doesn't happen. It's just the water, heated, steam, goes into the turbine, makes power for the generator. So with dams, so I'm just going to talk about the pros and cons of dams because that's what's most important to know. So, there's a lot of pros and cons about dams. So, the pros of dams, it generates large amounts of clean energy. Clean energy, great for us. Renewable energy, that's what this whole stream is about. Irrigation. So, this water gets moved through the turbines and then it gets put back out into the rivers. So, it's not like farming irrigation, but it's putting the water back out into the rivers. Old forms of dam used to just take the water and just push it off to the side, flood it somewhere else, like keep it. But what we use in dams today, it puts the water back into the river when it's done with it upstream. Sustainable development. So how are dams related to sustainable development? Well, I don't know if you talked about urbanization and sustainable development, new growth in your 8th class, or if you took AP Human, that's a big topic. But what dams are, it provides jobs for people to build the dams. It provides clean energy. It provides cheap energy once you build it. If some NGO goes into a poor country and builds a dam for the locals to use as power, then they can use that, and the people who build the dams locally get jobs, and then it helps stimulate their economy, makes money. They get energy, electricity for their homes. So it really helps to develop a country, its people, and its economy. So now let's move into what's not so good about dams. Thermal pollution. So slow modern movement happens more with dams, right? Yes, and I'm actually going to talk about that, Tanya. So thermal pollution. So that just means that there's excess heat let off from the dam. It can cause hot water to be spewed out a little bit, but that's not going to affect the flow of the river. So the cons of dams: destroys habitats. So when you build the dam, dams are huge. I don't know if you've seen the Hoover Dam, Hetchy Hetch, San Francisco, the Three Gorges Dam, the Yangtze River in China. They're massive constructs. So wherever you build it, you have to move the habitats. You have to move the earth in the area. So you're going to destroy the habitats that's just in the area of the dam and just around the dam, because nothing can live where there's all those turbines and metal and the big, giant concrete structures. And it disrupts fish migration. So there was an FRQ, I think, 3 or 4 years ago that was talking about what are the negative effects of dams. And one of the few things, there was only 4 main things on the rubric, but one of them was salmon get caught in the turbines and can't swim upstream for their seasonal migration. So basically what happens is some really new dams, some very developed dams, have these fish baskets, which basically downstream the river, when fish are trying to swim upstream, they can swim into these little areas and they'll get picked up, and then they'll go in these like water-filled, basically metal baskets that bring them up to the top of the dam and then bring them back down safely so they can keep swimming upstream for their seasonal migrations. But what happens sometimes, we went over this briefly in middle school. So what happens sometimes is that mostly salmon do this. I don't know if it's just because they're not as smart as other fish or they swim a lot more than other fish, but they swim and they try to swim through the turbines that spin with the water. So then their gills get caught, they get turned, and then they eventually get chopped up into little sushi and die. So nothing is perfect. No source of energy is perfect. You're going to take coal, which has carbon emissions. You're going to take oil, carbon emissions, burning those. You're going to take renewable energy is so expensive. How are we going to convert the whole world? Like, there's a lot of questions about renewable energy. There's a lot of cost to anything. If there was a perfect solution, nobody would be doing anything else but the perfect solution to energy in the world. So you really need to know, don't dams stop, I'm going to answer a question now. Don't dams also stop bass from accessing their breeding grounds? Yeah, and that's one of the things about destroys habitat and disrupts fish migration. So bass is the type of fish, they can't go swim upstream to where they can breed and lay their eggs for their offspring. So sometimes there are those like fish baskets that bring them up and down back upstream the river, but you know, not all dams have that. Sometimes there are passages for the fish to swim through, but sometimes they just swim deeper and then they get caught in the turbines. All right, so hydroelectric power. This is the Three Gorges Dam in China. It's the largest dam in the world. It's actually now mostly completed. It's almost all completed. So it is now the largest functioning dam in the world. But what happened in China is not like the United States. They can go in and just like tell people, you're not in your homes anymore, leave now, like find somewhere else to go. It's not like the US. They don't have the same type of laws and protections that we do. So basically what the Chinese government did to make this dam is they did what I just said. They basically went to all of the villages upstream of the dam and like, you guys are gone now, we're building this dam infrastructure, go find a new home. So they also did this to the animals there, but instead of telling them to find a new home, they basically died in the process of making this. But one of the problems with the Three Gorges Dam now even is that it has occasional flooding upstream. So some of the fish habitats and the amphibian habitats upstream of the dam are going to get hurt and they're going to get flooded and they're going to get destroyed. One of the cons of dams, the habitats get destroyed. They disrupt the fish migrations. Like it disrupts the environmental ways that the ecosystem can survive and flourish. All right. So now we're on to geothermal energy. This one is not as important as the other forms of energy. This one is the least tested. Some textbooks don't even cover geothermal energy. So I'm kind of just going to go through this quickly. If you have questions, please stop me. Please ask in the comments. Please do whatever you need to get the answers that you want. All right. So geothermal energy. There are two ways to get it. You can drill into the earth to get to the core, the mantle, to get the heat, the natural heat from the earth and extract it to make energy, or you can get it through the heat of geysers. So the main way that we do it is with geysers. So what happens is we'll put these little things on top of geysers and just under the surface, and what it'll do is it'll collect the heat and trap it and bring it to the power plant where it can be put into water and turned into steam, which can turn the turbines and turn the coil with the magnet in it to make electricity, the electromagnet. So the heat can be directly captured from these geysers to heat homes, your heater in the winter, your AC offices. Especially geothermal energy is used for greenhouses. If they ask anything, usually what my teacher had said is that usually they'll ask about geothermal energy heating greenhouses because greenhouses are special. They house the plants. So the geothermal energy is regulated by the earth already. So if we put it into the, same places that we get the heat from normally for plants and flora and fauna that we harvest in greenhouses, then we can use it there as well. All right, so geothermal energy. The heat can be used for steam to power plants and generate electricity like other energy sources. Yep, every energy source is the same. Takes the steam turns the turbines turn the coil has a magnet in it, the magnet moves around, that magnet becomes an electromagnet and makes electricity. Woo! Energy. I know I've said that like 5-6 times. I think I counted 6 times so far in this stream, but it's really important to know how energy gets made, what's the secret sauce, how do I make the energy? You know, you kind of need to know exactly how, especially if you're asked on an FRQ about how does a nuclear power plant work, how does a hydroelectric dam work. You need to know how to explain it, and it's good to know anyways because it can help you understand it, something that you don't understand about making energy. Okay, so next bullet. Geothermal energy, while not awful for the environment, most renewable energy sources are not awful for the environment besides dams, is very location specific. So what that means is that, I don't know if you know about wind turbines, but there are a lot of wind turbines out in West Texas, and I think that everyone who's on the stream so far has told me that they're from Texas, somewhere like Frisco, like Highlands is what I remember. So I don't know if you've ever driven through West Texas or Kansas or Oklahoma, but there are a ton of tall, giant, white wind turbines that spin with the wind. Oh, Hannah, you're from Florida. Wow. Sorry, I did not know that. Tanya, you've seen them. Yes, you know what I'm talking about. But welcome, Hannah. Sorry I didn't talk to you earlier. But yeah, so back to geothermal energy. It's very location specific. So what that means is that the energy can't go very far. In the US, there are 4 main power grids: West Coast, East Coast, Eastern Seaboard, Middle America, and then Texas. Texas has its own energy grid. Sorry, Hannah, but Texas is just better. I mean, there's no argument there. Texas is just the best state. It's the most important. Okay, so back to real science. The location-specific heat and energy, the energy is made and the heat is made to where it can't travel very far. So it's the same thing with wind energy. The wind turbines spin and it makes the electricity and energy right there. Nothing else that you can do. So, oh, we have a new person join. Hi, you're whoever that is. Welcome. I'm glad you could join us. Okay. So, geothermal energy. Not a lot there. One of the least tested types of energy. Okay. Hydrogen fuel cells. This is one of the most interesting types of energy and one of the ones with the least amount of drawbacks. It's honestly one of the coolest types of renewable energy. Cool meaning no emissions, so no global warming, and cool meaning, it's awesome. So hydrogen fuel cells. They're clean and non-toxic sources of energy. They never run out and they are energy efficient. I don't know if this is what you were asking about, Tanya. Yes, it can be used to replace a car battery, and I have a cool story about that later, Tanya. But I don't know if this is what you're asking about hydrogen, but this is the main way that hydrogen is used for energy. So these hydrogen fuel cells, they mainly do the kind of a similar process to nuclear fusion. They use the hydrogen atoms, they excite them, they get them to move around to make energy, right? I don't know if you've taken chemistry yet, but kind of how that works. But so the hydrogen can keep getting recycled and it can be used. So in the chemical reaction of electrolysis, what happens is that hydrogen atoms and water atoms are there. And so in electrolysis, the water breaks into the hydrogens and oxygens. The only emission from hydrogen fuel cells is the emission of oxygen, what we can breathe. So that's actually helping our environment. And hydrogen fuel cells, they're never-ending loops. They're positive feedback loops because it uses the hydrogen and then it turns it into water, and then it uses the water and makes hydrogen, and the hydrogen makes water. And then, so once we make these and split the electrons and protons and electrons, that's why I said it's similar to nuclear fission and not the same, because it uses more electrons than nuclear fission. And so they use the hydrogen and it gets excited, made into energy. So hydrogen is mostly used because it's very abundant. Hydrogen is numero uno, number one on the periodic table. It's the most used. It's one of the most used elements. It's never ending. It's always there. It doesn't hurt our atmosphere. It doesn't help our atmosphere. I mean, hydrogen is just there, and there's a lot of it. Okay, but everything comes with its consequences. Hydrogen fuel cells, they're expensive, and they require intense safety protocols to prevent hydrogen leakage, because even though hydrogen is not awful, whenever all of the atoms are split, I don't know if you know any like in-depth chemistry about like half-lives of elements and other radioactive things, but anything that's an element can be turned into something explosive. So basically, hydrogen bombs, don't know if you've ever heard of them. Kind of important, kind of killed a lot of people. But they basically did one of the processes that are in hydrogen fuel cells where they split the electrons and it goes kaboom. But what they're doing here is the electrons are used to make energy and they're controlled, and it's making sure that it never really hurts anyone. But the safety protocols need to be in place to use hydrogen fuel cells for major energy sources, because we don't want any hydrogen leaking or anything else that can go kaboom at the site of fire or excess heat. They're also really expensive. Like, there's hydrogen fuel cell cars, which I'm about to talk about, which are really cool, but they're kind of expensive. So actually, I want to segue into hydrogen fuel cells in the real world. So this picture right here, it's not an awesome picture that I got from Toyota, but it is. It actually looks kind of cool, but it doesn't really showcase. The Toyota Mirai, it's a car that came from Toyota in Japan, and what happened is replacing the combustion of gasoline in the car, they replaced it with a hydrogen fuel cell. This is what you asked about earlier, Tanya. It replaces the battery and the combustion. So the Toyota, they started making this electric car. So there are Teslas that power on, you plug it in, you charge it, but this doesn't need to be charged. It does need to be refueled with hydrogen though, but it doesn't need to be plugged in. It just takes as long as it does to fill up your car with gas. They started their program in LA and Tokyo. So they put free hydrogen fueling stations around those cities, especially in Santa Monica and LA. And what they did is you bring your car, you fill it up for free, you're done. Like, it really takes as much time as filling your car up with gasoline. And they're trying to do it to get people to drive these and drive clean, because even with electric cars, that's not the best and permanent solution. Because if you think about it, to get the electricity and the energy to put into your Tesla or Toyota Prius, you have to burn fossil fuels to get electricity. How do we get electricity and energy in the US? Natural gas, coal. We're using fossil fuels to make the energy for your electric car. I'm so sorry. I don't know why there's my phone going off. Oh my god. I'm so sorry about that. I don't know why there's a random alarm going off. But the hydrogen fuel cells, they can be used to power the car, the electricity. It's not needed anymore. So what will happen when they scrap the car? What will happen to the battery? That's an interesting question. That's why they have these pilot programs in LA and Tokyo, is because Toyota, when you are done with the car, you have to take the car back into Toyota. They have a special team of engineers and physicists that will help remove the hydrogen fuel cells and carefully dispose of them, just like they will dispose of them safer than they do uranium in nuclear power plants in the US currently. The safety standards that Toyota has set for themselves are higher for these hydrogen fuel cell cars than we have for nuclear power plants in the United States. Just something to think about. All right. So, and I like this GIF because it really shows how the hydrogen fuel cells are made. It's like if you want to look at it or watch it work for a second, you see how I'll put on my pointer again. You see how the hydrogen comes in, goes onto the proton exchange membrane, then oxygen from the air comes and combines to make water. And then the water, it's not shown in this GIF, which is, it's there and it's kind of cool, but it's not as good as this right here. This just isn't as fun to look at. The water can get reused and turned back into the hydrogen and oxygen, and another piece of the hydrogen fuel cell that would go like right over here next to this GIF, but it's not in it for some reason, so kind of makes me a little upset. But you can see here, the electrons, they power the electricity to combine the hydrogen and oxygen, they make water, make steam. Perfect, right? Yep. Hydrogen fuel cells, they're great, but they're expensive and they require, a lot of development to make them. All right. Any questions from Hannah, Dakota, or even Tanya? Anyone else who's still on the stream? Anything that you didn't think that I explained well enough the first time? Or anything that you really just didn't understand when I talked about it? I will go back right now. That's why I'm leaving time for it. Okay. So if you have anything to say, please say it. But I am going to move on for right now. Okay. So what I'm going to do next is we're going to have okay, no questions. Perfect. Okay. So I'm going to go through a practice FRQ right now. So there's two or three parts to this FRQ. I can't remember. But what I'm going to do is there are only 3 of you, so that's perfect. If you want to, what you can do is, yeah, I know. See, I don't love FRQs. I don't love writing, but I love thinking of my own ideas and not having like a half right, half wrong answer that I have to choose on the multiple choice portion of the AP test. So you can look at this practice FRQ if it would load. Oh, no, that's MCQ. I'm so sorry. Here's the FRQ. There are 3 parts. So each of you can do one of them yourselves if you want to, if that box would ever move from number C. Okay, perfect. Okay, so I think I covered most of this in my stream, but what I want you to do, if any of you are comfortable, if you comment and like, oh, I want to answer part A, then what I can do is I can bring you up on the screen and you can talk the rest of us in this session through it. So does anybody want to do any of the parts after reading this FRQ? Does nobody want to do it? Yes, I can bring you up on screen. Do you want to, Tanya? Does nobody want to come on and talk? Darn it. Oh, well, okay. You can chat and answer. That's fine. Do you want to do A, B, or C? C. Okay. So Hannah or Dakota, do you want to do A or B? Chat or talking. Either one is fine. No? Okay. Well, then I think that I've definitely covered. I'm good. I'll just listen. Okay. So Hannah, you'll do B. So I'm guessing you were chatting it. So I'll go through A right now. So identify and describe how nuclear fission creates electricity. So I will talk my way through it. So nuclear fission is a process where uranium is put into a nuclear reactor and had the nuclei split to create electricity. How this happens is that control rods put on the nuclei of the uranium will allow it to split and create some neutrons, but not too many to be used, that can power the water and create steam with the electrons that are left from the uranium. And then the steam will go on to spin a turbine, which then turns a coil with a magnet in it to make that magnet an electromagnet. And that electromagnet is creating electricity, which is taken by a transformer, a generator, which can allow it to go off to substations and power homes. Okay. If anybody is ready with their part. Yeah. So I will go back to the diagram at the end here for the nuclear power, because I think that one's the best, and take a picture of that if you haven't already. Okay. Yes. And if there's anything you want me to go back so you can take a picture of the slide or the image, I will totally do that now. Okay. Okay. I will just go back through everything when we're done here. Like the diagrams. Okay. So, have either of you done? Are you sure neither of you want to talk on screen? It would definitely be a little more fun if you could explain it instead of having to type it out. Okay. So you guys can keep thinking about your answers, and I'll go back to this when we're done. But multiple choice is just a little bit easier to go through right now. So I'll go to one of the multiple choice questions you guys can look at when you're done writing your answer to the FRQ. It does not have to be in depth. I just want to see the ideas and make sure that you're on the right track, and I've actually taught you something that's useful in this stream. Okay. So what I'm going to do is, if you go into the polls section, I've created a, if it would ever load, I've created a poll that you can go through and select your answer. You don't have to, you can put it in the comments, you don't have to, but there's a poll there. I don't know if you see the little one next to it, but you can go vote on whichever answer you think is right. All right. Okay, so while you guys are looking at the MCQ, I'll go over Hannah's answer for Part B. It was identify and describe an environmental consequence of nuclear power. Okay, so Hannah said an environmental consequence could be the large amounts of radiation that are released in our air or in our water streams. Okay, so you're on the right track. I think that I might have said something a little bit wrong. You're on the right track. So the radiation is contained in the reactor of the nuclear power plant. So yes, there could be radiation in the water, that's just not in the air. The radiation can come from when the nuclear rods are done and they're disposed of and they're not disposed of properly, there can be radiation. But if you're trying to get points on the FRQ, that's right. You're saying all the right things. Just make sure you say because the nuclear fuel rods were not disposed of properly. And then your FRQ is perfect. You got the point. Wonderful. Okay. So now that I've gone through Hannah's part of the FRQ, I'll look at the MCQ results. So it looks like, okay, actually, okay. Back to the FRQ portion. I will actually just go back to the slide here. Okay. The combustion of fossil fuels produces greenhouse gases. An alternative is nuclear power. Tanya had C. Discuss a nuclear disaster. Okay, so it says, discuss a nuclear disaster that's previously happened. So what I'm saying is don't make something up. Don't come with a possibility. I just said that just to make sure that you're saying something that happened. Okay. So Tanya said, during Chernobyl, The building that generated nuclear power had a spill, and because of the released radiation, will not be able to live there until 2100, which is 980 years away. So, yep, Chernobyl, one of the big three nuclear disasters, nuclear meltdowns. The building that generated the power, it was actually power generator building number 4 in Chernobyl. They were supposed to be running a test. Like, your answer's right. I would have given you the point if I was grading your FRQ. But what happened very specifically was that there was the lead engineer on site who was going in to run a test and make sure all the systems were working properly. So they had to turn off all of the safety stuff in Chernobyl. Chernobyl was the biggest and most important nuclear disaster also. So during this test, the engineer kind of forgot to turn the safety system back on. So what happened is the control rods that I was talking about, they didn't go back in properly. So the nuclear fission created too much energy and too much electricity for the reactor to handle. And that's why, when I was talking about earlier, we have to predict the amount of energy that we're going to use. You have to make sure that you're creating the exact right amount of energy to be used. So what's going on is that there's too much energy and it built up and it kind of exploded the nuclear reactor core, and then that's what caused the radiation to be released into the atmosphere and then the big mushroom cloud. So yeah, there was too much energy produced because none of the safety systems were on. But that was one of the main reasons, but it's not the only one. It's not the only reason. There were multiple things that contributed because the safety systems were turned off. Like, it's not only because there's too much energy, it's just a factor. But it is one of the major ones. Okay, so I think that we're good there. Dakota, did you learn something? You sat back, you watched. I'll go back to the multiple choice question now. Okay. Okay, so what is a renewable energy source that does not originate from solar radiation? So this question is basically asking what renewable energy source of this list, solar, geothermal, wind energy, or energy from biomass, does not originally start with the sun being able to heat it. So let's see what you guys said. A was definitely out because it's in the name. And then, so I'll eliminate the options. So it looks like you all said C. Okay, so let's go through the options here. So solar energy, that one's obviously out. A's out. It's in the name. I was really hoping that nobody would pick A. Okay, energy from biomass, that's coming from biofuels, and why that one is caused by solar radiation is some biofuels like corn, ethanol. Corn makes ethanol. It's produced because the sun allows for photosynthesis, plants, you know, all that great jazz about agriculture, photosynthesis. Then the plants can be made, they can mature, and then they can be processed into making biofuel, which is energy from biomass. So we've eliminated A, we've eliminated D. All right, so now we're left with B and C. So you guys all picked C. But I want to know, okay, I'm going to tell you that C is wrong. The correct answer is B. But I want to, do you guys have an explanation why you picked C, or did you just guess? Like, I want to see, or did you think that I said something along the lines of wind turbines do not, or geothermal does come from the sun? No, okay. So it's saying, the question is asking, what is a renewable energy source that does not originate from solar radiation? So I'm saying is that wind is caused by the sun. So I don't know if you know this, but wind, how much wind we have is actually caused by the sun's rays and the directness, how it hits the clouds on the earth. Wind is caused by the sun. So, did not know that, yeah. So if you want to Google it, there's a much more like in-depth thing I don't know. I feel like I learned that like wind was from the sun a long time ago, like maybe when I was in 5th grade now. But you can probably get a lot more detailed explanation. But yes, wind does come from the sun. So, and then geothermal, why is that the correct answer? So it does not, I think the geothermal is heating and the sun is hot and not thinking geothermal. Okay, so geothermal energy is coming from the earth. It does not, I got it down, okay, so Tawny said I got it down to B and C. C made the most sense and Dakota had already selected it. Yeah, peer pressure gets you to change your answer real quick right there, doesn't it, Tanya? Okay, so I will actually go back to how does the sun affect wind for a second, just to give you more in-depth explanation. So basically, when the Earth's surface absorbs the sun's energy, it turns light into heat. The heat on the Earth's surface warms the air above it. The air over the equator gets warmer than the surface area near the poles. The moving air from the heat is what we call wind. So the wind is caused because, I'm sorry, what are we talking about? In the comments, I'm sorry if you're watching the replay of this and I'm looking so dumb right now looking at the comments. Oh, okay. So just some bad math, but from the Chernobyl FRQ, but I think we got the point. It got the point. So, we got it. So the sun causes wind because when the surface absorbs the sun's energy, then the warm air rises above the cold air, and then they combine, and then they make wind. I don't know if you know anything about tornadoes. That's easier to relate it to because, us AP environmental students know everything about the specifics, but we don't know any of the general stuff, right? So, that tornadoes, they're caused when the warm air and the cool air swirls around, and they get combined, and then it makes the little funnel. So the same thing, but with a little less intensity, is wind. So when you're talking about the Hadley cell and the Ferrel cell and the polar cell, you're thinking about the movement of air and the movement of heat. So warm air rises, cool air falls. You've got that cycle. And that's how the sun affects convection currents. And that's how the sun affects wind on the earth. I mean, I hope I made that more clear. But if it came down to it on the AP test, don't look at your friend's Scantron and copy the answer. Just don't let what somebody else picked influence your answer. Good advice for life. Never works out. Okay. So why is geothermal energy right? So I think that Dakota said, I was thinking that geothermal energy is heat and the sun is hot, not thinking that geothermal energy comes from the earth itself. So yeah. So even though I said geothermal energy is not tested a lot, you do have to know the basics of everything. I kind of said that to try and see if I could trick you into not paying attention or going to go get your hot chocolate or eat dinner during that point and turn off and mute me. So, basically, geothermal energy, it comes from the heat that comes from the core and the mantle. So the sun provides most of the heat for the earth, right? But the core and the mantle are so hot. I don't know if you guys have ever been to Yellowstone, Yosemite, any of the national parks out west that have geysers. They're giant, like the water goes up, it erupts. It's actually really cool to see when a geyser erupts. But Old Faithful, one of the biggest geysers in the world, like it produces so much heat. If you've ever stood around it when you went to Yellowstone, Tanya, it gets really hot. And that's how we get our geothermal energy. And that's how we get our geothermal energy, the heat from those geysers, and also from drilling down into the earth to extract the heat from the mantle and the core. And the solar radiation doesn't really help it because it's the heat that the earth already has in itself. So, I'm sorry that I have failed you so far in this session, but hopefully you guys can redeem yourself with another multiple choice. I was expecting this one to be harder, but I think I also might have accidentally said the answer as I was going through the stream. So let me pull up the second multiple choice now. Negative impacts of hydroelectric power. So remember when I talked about the 3 negative impacts? It was, habitat destruction, disrupts fish migration, and one other one that affects these choices that I've given you. So go into the poll section and vote for what you guys think is the answer. I've tried to make this one a little more challenging. Oh, I'm sorry. That was supposed to update. DO means dissolved oxygen. That was supposed to, it only fixed it on one slide. I'm sorry. Oh my gosh. Decide your answer before you look at what other people pick, please. I'm going to give you that advice again this time. So one of you hasn't answered. I can't see who chooses what for the poll, so. Tanya, I'm wrong again. You know what? It's okay to be wrong. That's why you're coming to this live stream today, to figure out what you know. Okay, so I'm going to give whoever's left, which I think is Hannah, about 10 more seconds to answer before I go over the. Okay, perfect. I've got 3 answers. So let's go see what we got. Okay, so we have 2 votes for B and 1 vote for C. So Tanya, did you mean to choose C? Did you want to choose C? Okay, so you wanted to choose C. Were you the one that chose C, though? Oh, you can change your poll votes. I didn't know that. Okay, so, yes, I did. Okay, so let's go through these things. So hydroelectric power, that's dams. Excess CO2 and CH4 emissions. Okay, so CO2 and CH4. I feel like, you know what? Let me go back and look at that slide again. Let's see, hydroelectric power, aka dams. What was one of the pros of dams? Creates large amounts of clean energy. I don't think that CO2 and CH4 emissions are that clean for our atmosphere. So for right now, I don't think that 1 is a good answer. Ah, 1 was a trick answer. It's the opposite. So let's look at 2 and 3. So 2, decrease in dissolved oxygen. So the thermal pollution. Thermal pollution can cause the water to get really hot, which is an increase in water temperature. So how that happens is, I don't know about if you've talked about how when you have pollution in a river or stream, you have fish deaths. You have things dying that can't suit to that environment anymore. So what happens is your anaerobic decomposers come in. And your aerobic decomposers come in, and they want to come decompose all of the dead organisms now because there's a spill or the water's too hot for them to be in. So I'll tell you now, the aerobic decomposers, I'm sorry, let me type that up. Aerobic decomposers are little microbes that use oxygen. And they basically decompose dead organisms using oxygen. The only thing you need to know for apes about aerobic decomposers is that they use oxygen, and anaerobic decomposers do not use oxygen. That's what you need to know about the 2 types of decomposers. Yes, I don't know if I did I say that wrong? I'm so sorry if I said that wrong. But the negative impacts of hydroelectric power, back to what we were talking about. So we know that for right now, 1 is wrong and 3 is right. But now we're looking at 2. So 2, a decrease in DO. So the fish are dead, the anaerobic decomposers come in. So to decompose all of these dead organisms and take the nutrients, they have to use a lot of oxygen. And DO is dissolved oxygen. And what that means is that when there's all the dissolved oxygen used by the aerobic decomposers, there's no more for the fish. So that means that there is a decrease in dissolved oxygen because the little aerobic decomposers are using all of the dissolved oxygen in the water. So that one is also right. So we know that 1 is false, 2 is true, and 3 is true. Now let's go look at our answer choices. Which one do you think is right? Drum roll. And I think that you got it right, Tanya. It is C. C, on this slide, dissolved oxygen got spelled out in number 2, but it did not on the first slide for some reason. That must have just slipped. Some kind of editing check that I did. But yeah, so 2 of you chose B, which I'm assuming is Dakota and Hannah. So what made you, that chose B. So why did you choose B? So you thought that there was CO2, and so CO2 is carbon dioxide and CH4 is methane emissions, which come with fossil fuels. But did you just look at it wrong? You saw excess as reduced, or you saw something that just wasn't there? Because I am definitely guilty of seeing something that's not in the question, using that as my only reason to pick the wrong answer. Okay. Well, if you don't understand something, we're about to finish the stream. I know you guys might have really enjoyed this. I didn't know what dissolved oxygen was. Okay, dissolved oxygen. It's basically just oxygen that's dissolved into water. That's how fish breathe underwater, with their gills. And thanks, guys. Have a great night.